Welcome to the Pantheon Plus Rewind.
Greetings and salutations, adventurers. It's time for episode 125 of the Pantheon Plus Rewind, our weekly podcast that brings you the latest news and community content, as well as some discussion surrounding the upcoming MMORPG, Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. This week, we're giving away some pledges. Also, we check out a community debate about epic quests, see what motivates our MMO players, and end with another The Lore You Know. Holiday season is nearing, and for many of us in the Northern Hemisphere, blankets and hot drinks are a growing part of our everyday lives. So cozy up with me, Desrin, and my warm co-host, Theric, for this week's Rewind. Okay, so for like the first time, somehow, it's actually like raining while we're recording. It's kind of off and on, but it might come through the mic when it starts pouring again. It's started coming down about twice today, so it'd be kind of fun.
Is it like a full on thunderstorm, or are we just talking about a drizzle, or is this like, you know, your area of the world is known for its rain, right? So
that's kind of the funny thing is like where I'm at in Oregon, though, it's actually not that it's not that stereotypical. But yeah, I heard like one thunder yesterday. But for the most part, it's just rain. We usually just get rain. Okay. But yeah, it was coming down quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, it's getting cold here. We had frost the last couple mornings, and I think there was snowfall in the northern part of the province today, and I think they're predicting snow next week at some point. So it's definitely getting cold. It's definitely winter's on the horizon. So it begins, and I'll be posting pictures in our Discord of our massive snowfall as I did last year.
Nice.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll appreciate that because I mean we probably won't get that, but it is the time of the year, and I'm pretty happy to actually have like blankets on my bed. I'm not even gonna lie. It's a good feeling, but
you gotta stay warm, man. Gotta stay cozy.
That's right. You know what else is super cozy? Our very warm adventuring party. So. We've got Ziplocks on the Darkmoor Rogue, Sparoh on the Elf Ranger, Bounty Code on the Human Wizard, Screech on the Scar Bard, Wiki-Woo on the Human Enchanter, Shuriken on the Dwarf Cleric, Orsosaurus on the Human Warrior, Fury Wrath on the Archai Summoner, Pavejo on the Gnome Wizard, Acera Avienda on the Elf Ranger, Churro Dude on the Halfling Direlord, and Galarain Moonsong on the Elf Ranger. So it is giveaway time, right?
Yes. Yeah. I'm ready to give away some pledges, man. Excited.
Yeah. So, you know, as usual, we always appreciate you guys' support. And this is one way that we get to kind of turn that around for you guys and, you know, pay it forward in a sense, especially because we have so many people in our audience that listen to us all the time and surprising amount don't have Pantheon pledges or have, you know, very, very low Pantheon pledges. And so, yeah, we're going to be handing out 3 pledges. So the big one is the Black Rose pledge, right? So that's a big $500 pledge.
Right.
And then 2 Watchers pledges. So
and those are $50 a piece.
Yep. And so all you have to do is, you know, be here for the premiere today, right? I just realized I'm recycling notes here, but so, you know, be in the chat. It's the YouTube play emoji, so just at Theric with the YouTube play emoji. So he'll enter you in the drawing.
I'm getting good at this. I'm getting pretty practiced at this whole drawing thing. I've got like my system set up where I've got like 3 screens going, like one with the randomizer, one with the list of names. So you can't overwhelm me. So just come at me with those names and I'll be right on top of it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And in this case, we are encouraging people to stack, right?
Yeah. If you can stack your pledge on top of a pledge you already have, that's great. You know, if it gets you from alpha or from beta into alpha, or if you're really in the good spot and you have like a Pathfinder pledge already, I believe, then you can. It's the Pathfinder is a $250 one, and you were to win the Black Rose, puts you into $750, which is the PA access pledge. So it'd be great to see somebody get that. And the only restriction on this whole thing is that if you've won a pledge through the rewind before, we just ask that you don't enter again. It just so somebody else can get a chance. There will be a time when we open it up again for everybody, but we want to make sure that, somebody new gets a chance at it. And it's just, a more friendly way to do it.
Yeah, well, let's spread it out,
Yeah.
Make sure to enter into that. And of course, you guys are awesome. You guys make this able to happen and able to run our platform and all that. So thank you. And if you would like to be a part of the adventuring party I listed earlier, you can drop a super chat in the premiere, during the show, and super thanks in the comments now on YouTube. And we'll get your name on our, scrolling banner that I don't know why we joke about. Like, the scrolling banner is totally great, but I just decided to pick on it one day, and I love it.
Yeah, you started something that you are now unprepared to finish, so we're going to keep going with this. I noticed you recycled the notes, and it still says meticulously crafted, and I think you should really just stick with that. Really.
Yes, meticulously crafted banner. just for your great edification.
Beautiful.
So thanks as always, though. But I think we should get into the show.
Definitely.
All right, let's go.
This week in Visionary Realms News and Notes. All right, so this is our light news week, and we're just going to do a little Twitter circle back because the official Visionary Realms Twitter account put out an interesting tweet at the beginning of October that we never really talked about. It's a good discussion point, and we always end up having discussions about how Pantheon is breaking the trend of these single-player focused MMOs or single-player very friendly MMOs and emphasizing a group-centric approach. But we speak of that in generalities, and we sometimes forget that we need to hone in on what exactly that means, because you can talk about the whole game being group-centric, or you can say which pieces are group-centric, which are more solo-friendly, that kind of thing. And that's the question that VR put on their Twitter. It talks about one specific area, that being epic quests. So here, let me read the question. This is from their Twitter. It's part of their community debate series. How much of an epic quest should be soloable? And then they created there's a forum on the threads, a thread on the forums, I should say, that if you wanted to give your opinion, you could. And we took our responses from Twitter here because there were some really interesting ones. So Desrin, we'll go through these and just chime in here on some thoughts you might have. I've put a few of my thoughts in response to these, so just let me know what you think.
Yeah, gladly.
So the first one we have is from Casa Black, and they said, epic should be group quested unless your game is so dead that you can't find groups, in which case you have a completely different problem. So what they're saying is 0%. No solo ability. Every step from start to finish should be required group necessary.
Huh.
If you can't, sorry, go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, just that's right off the bat. That's probably a surprising one, I think.
So you'll see as we go through these how I've sort of structured these responses, because we're starting out at basically nothing, no solo ability, which means that's a pretty bold take. Anything when on one end of the spectrum or the other is going to be a bold take. It does speak to the importance of how Pantheon's group finding tools are going to be essential. How necessary it is that they're going to go with this group-centric approach to the game. You got to be able to find groups. What they say, what Casa Black says here is, basically saying if you can't find a group, the game's dead. I don't know if I agree with that, because, you could have a game that allows for different activities. Now, in Epic Quest, if you can't find a group for your Epic Quest and it requires a group, maybe that part of the game needs to be reconsidered.
Yeah. I mean, if the game really is that kind of in the dumps that there's not a population to support like groups at all, I mean, yeah, of course you have a different problem, but that is saying the game is basically completely dead, in which case I don't know if they would be, have the staff to redo anything. But I mean,
True.
If it was to the point where population was super low, yeah, I guess you'd have to work with that a bit. But I don't know if the population's ever so low that you literally cannot find a group. Like, we're talking about like maybe even on the Vanguard emulator, you know? There's you get like 50 people and you'll still get groups.
It's funny you should bring up Vanguard, because that's what I was about to say is I did get to that point in Vanguard when it was live, not the emulator, that finding groups was really hard. The population of that game dropped off dramatically in its latter years. And I really had a hard time finding groups, to be honest with you. And I'm wondering about what people listening to this, their experiences have been. Have you been in a game where you could not find a group for something that you needed a group for? Because I think that is the real fear of making group-centric game, is that you're going to create content that people can't complete because there's no groups to be had.
Yeah, that's true.
And
that's true.
I think that's a very real thing. So when, this position that Casa Black is taking here on this is very...
it's gonna like go all out, you know?
It puts the game developer in a real... you're really committed to making a group-centric game if you're going to make content that requires every piece of content requires 100% of a group 100% of the time. So yeah, the next one is a little bit less on that end of the spectrum. This is from Sean Hamilton, and they said, quote, Epic has lost its definition. I think maybe 15% should be solo. So just 15% should be solo. This should be one of the hardest quests in the game. The more of it that can be done solo, the less stories, becomes less memorable. And if it's too easy, it devalues the item and the experience. So we're now gone from, 100% should be group centric. Now this Sean Hamilton is saying, only 15% of the quest should be soloable. And by definition, saying an epic quest is one of the hardest quests. We've talked about this before, Desiree. Like, what does epic mean? Does it mean difficulty? Does it mean length of the quest? Does it mean the intricacy of the quest? Because you can have quests that are super long, but are just super simple.
Yeah,
or you can have quests that are tedious, one step.
Yeah,
super tedious. I'm going to pick on Final Fantasy 14 here because that's what I found a lot of the quests so long, but so tedious if you weren't like in love with the story, I guess. But epic quests can be defined a bunch of different ways. And I think that this really speaks to it. So, Sean is saying like, it should be mostly group content.
I'm going to read one of your notes here because I want this to be brought up, but you say, can a solo quest be hard? And I think the implication of this message is that solo is easy. Which I think is a further problem that maybe we don't have time to investigate today. But I don't know if I would equate solo with easy. So I, maybe put a pin in that for now. But I do agree that an epic quest should be hard. I just don't want to equate solo with easy either.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think it's a question that we should throw out to the community. Like, can you think of an example of a solo quest that was very difficult?
Like, I think the Final Fantasy 11 people are going to jump up, if I remember right.
Please do, because I'd love to hear about it. I want to hear those stories about a solo quest that was very difficult. Because to me, I can't think of one, to be honest. And I'm talking about 100% soloable, I'm not talking about like a game, like one where it was like you could do everything up until the final step, which was like a raid, right? So there are those. Anyway, it's an interesting question. Now the next one is sort of where we're approaching this sort of the middle ground. So this is from Scales, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Anyway, they say 50% solo, 40% party, and then 10% raid level. They say major milestones should require a larger group, but for the most part, I think attaining your epic should have the majority be solo content you can do when your friends aren't on. So solo content could also be done in a group, but shouldn't be required, which is an interesting final line. And I think that last line about solo content can be done in a group is the way that a lot of modern MMO design has been envisioned. Yeah. Because what you hear a lot of the time is saying, well, you can group with friends if you want to.
Yeah, and it's like, but then we like literally are one-shotting everything. There's no challenge. There's no, anything.
It's trivial. It's trivial.
And, right? And no one gets anything for it either. It's just like, we finished the quest, but I mean.
Yeah. It's like the satisfaction of swatting a mosquito with 5 different people. And it's like, we don't really need that many people to do this. And then nobody wants scaling. Nobody wants difficulty scaling, whether it's based on if you have 1 person in the group or 6 people in the group. So I think that that's an important point that I don't want to see. I don't want to see Pantheon really, take that approach, saying it's optional to group. You could do this as a group, and we're a social game. But then if you're not feeling like being in a group, you can do it by yourself too. That's a problem.
Well, what's funny is that like that is kind of how Pantheon is going to be, just because it's open world. Like there's no, restrictions like that. So it's like technically what seems to be the case is that just about anything that you can solo, you could group. But the way that they accomplish that is different enough that I think it kind of separates that experience a bit.
Well, the difference will be that there is actual group content. Like nobody's going to want to group up.
That's a good point. There's actual like group content too. So like that.
Yeah. I mean, if there's better content for a group, people are going to do that and not just do the solo stuff. Cause it would be like, be choosing to go on the merry-go-round when you can go on the roller coaster, right? It's like, it's just better. People will argue that maybe that's a bad example, but you know what I mean? Another point that Scales makes here, I thought, was, talking about being the major milestones in an epic quest.
Oh yeah, I like this. Yeah,
I kind of do too. I think that maybe is something where I would focus in on and say like there should be maybe a couple trivial steps along the way, not trivial but soloable, and then but the big stuff has to be group content.
Right.
So
I think that's this is a bad example, but like the epic weapon quests in EQ2. Like this is the first iteration, I know, because I didn't play the however many revisions of them they've had since, but there were like I would say milestones as in major parts of the quest where you get like a interim reward. So obviously like you get the fabled version of your epic first, and then you continue to do more of the quest and get the mythical version, which is like the epic, which required a bunch of raiding and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of milestones where you feel like you've accomplished something, but usually a milestone comes best when it's like right after this head, where you have expended some energy, right? Like you've pushed yourself, and then okay, you get some reward for that, and then there's kind of this not roller coaster, but peaks and troughs of a quest, right? Just like a story.
Yeah. It's not at the volume's not at 10 the whole time. It's sort of you scale it down a little bit. You do something, give the player a little bit of a respite.
Yeah, a little bit of solo stuff. Kind of getting some progress in there when you have time.
Yep. That's a good point. EverQuest 2 was actually brought up a lot in these Twitter responses. I don't know if I included any that cited specifically, but that exact example of what you just said was mentioned in this Twitter thread. So I think there's something to be learned from that. That seemed like a very popular way of doing content in terms of soloability.
There were some things that were done pretty badly, I would say, but also some things that I extremely approve of.
Yeah. Well, this next tweet actually talks about something you referenced just now. This is from Palaver002. They said, I like 60% being soloable. Should have some trade skills in there that make it a time sink. Maybe 25% is groupable, and maybe 1 or 2 raids. Would prefer if you got a usable version without the raids. Not everyone's capable of raiding. So Desiree, this is what you're talking about, like having a non-raid version. Should there be different versions of these epic items? I get from what you said, you think that would be a good idea?
Maybe not versions, because just having like fabled and mythical versions, it was kind of like, okay, it's the same item, but better. There were definite differentiators. And, the mythical one had like usually these effects and stuff that really distinguished it. But I would actually prefer a different item on the way. Like,
I would too.
Yeah. It's not the end goal item, just worse, it's more just like, it's something, just not the end.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me too. I'm not a big fan of different versions of items because it'll always feel like you didn't quite get there. It'll always feel like you're good, but you're not the best, or like you didn't really do the quest. I would never be satisfied with that. I like what Palaver said about having trade skills being a part of the epic quest, and it kind of raises the question that does having a crafter, or in Pantheon's case, maybe a keeper, qualify it as group centric?
I was just thinking that, man. I was just thinking that.
I mean, it's not a traditional sense of group centric. You think of a group centric as being kill mob with friends, like that's your group.
Broaden it to just requiring other people.
Right. And I think that there's something to be learned there. I think there's something to be mined there, perhaps, that you can do. And there will be another tweet that sort of brings up another aspect of this, because I think that you can kind of broaden your definition of group centric a little bit, and we don't need to be so maybe so traditional about it.
Yeah, I like that.
Some people might not agree with that, but that's what we're here to have a discussion about. So the next one's from Mackenzo, and this is the one I just mentioned. So they said, I would love if they were soloable, but only with craftables from others and buffs, meaning you have to do some prep work to go on these journeys and allowing for a flourishing economy. But there should be some that are for groups. So basically building off that last tweet and involving buffs and prep work from other players. So maybe you had a portion of your epic quest where you had to really, you really wanted to get, like, let's just use Spirit of the Wolf as an example, but you had to get a sow to get through this certain aspect of the quest, right? And that brings in other players. I kind of like that. I do think it, again, expands the definition of group centric to a new place.
Yeah.
And we've seen this a little bit. What do you think?
I like the idea of considering just getting buffs or pref work to be kind of part of the groupiness, or at least not being completely self-reliant. Because maybe we should kind of separate those things. So what's interesting about this is there's a difference here between solo and self-reliance. And I think a lot of people, when they think solo, they think complete self-reliance. When solo could mean you do the thing by yourself, but you have gotten help along the way from other people, in whatever way. And this, buffs is a nice, easy example, right? I like the idea of this being, a component, but the whole solo for a quote unquote epic quest is, I'm not all down with the, with the fullness of this suggestion.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's always nuance to it. And you could look at it even as like, would getting somebody to help you out with some armor or some weapons, is that considered still soloing if you're getting like, somebody's twinking you out, like you don't want to go too far with it, because again, Pantheon is about being a group centric game. And that's what we have, I think I'll speak for myself, have really bought into, and that's what I want. And the last tweet sort of speaks to that, because I think it's a good example. It's not into the percentages, because we went from basically 0 to these last tweets being closer to 100% soloable. This is from Rex Havoc. It just sort of says, they say, well, there is epic and then there's epic difficulty. After all, Frodo and Sam destroyed an artifact of immense power by simply walking into Mordor. I like this because it kind of, it's very, yeah, right. I mean, I love that they use that.
Where's
phrasing.
The meme? I need the meme.
Where's the meme? Yeah, where's Sean Bean? So, it's a touchstone for this discussion, this point, because there's so many parallels. Epic doesn't always necessarily mean epic difficulty. We talked about that. But, a fellowship, right? A group. Does that mean it has to be a complex task? Not necessarily. It means that it has to feel big. And I think when you are working with other people, things necessarily feel bigger. The monumentalness of the task becomes more apparent. I feel like there's lots of great solo journeys out there. There's lots of, things that we might call epic that have been done by solo, players or a solo character in a story perhaps. But I always feel like when you work as a team and it's involving other people, there's just a more grandiose nature to it. And I'll just give my overall thoughts on this whole subject. One of the best things in terms of lately what we've been doing with playing Embers Adrift is experiencing that group content and experiencing group dynamics when, for example, like a good item drops. And we're talking about epic quests, which obviously the assumption is it results in an epic item, you know, and that you get that epic item drop. Multiple people, including myself, they all roll on it, or maybe there's somebody that's, you know, got some, however you're distributing loot, not only getting it, which is great, but if somebody else gets it. We had that happen the other night where Stands in the Fire got a great hammer that we were so excited to see him get and then show off. And we all sort of like looked at it and, you know, talked about the stats of it. It was one of the best feelings. Whereas if I'm just solo there, I'm get this nice hammer, like I'm there all by myself cheering up and down and that's it. You know, like it just doesn't have, go me. So I really don't want these epic moments to be lost on being a single person, single solo player in that moment. Now you take that and expand it to an epic item, right? I think epic items should really only be attainable with extensive group involvement. So that's the bottom line. You know, you can set up tasks with initial steps that are solo friendly. I think a good epic quest brings in skills and abilities of some of the other classes like we talked about with buffs, but more along the lines of needed to complete the task. I need your abilities, whether it's, you know, your class specific skills or passives or anything like that, or racial abilities. I think that's another approach. And not only that, but other people's minds. I'm talking about human player and their decision making and their tactical approaches. Adding all that in really makes it a more fulsome experience to me. So when I say epic quests, I would, if we're going to put numbers on it, I would go with like an 80% group content, 20% soloable, perhaps. You know, if it's a 10-step quest, just to break it down a little further, maybe the first 2 steps are basically the solo parts where you get the quest. Then you got to do some traveling. Maybe you got to map out a certain path or something like that. You know, that Choppa's talked about travel and the experience of discovery in Pantheon being so fundamental and part of the game. That's great. That's fine. I think that's where you can really get people in and give them that solo entry level. And then you bring in the group stuff and then you go from there. So, you know, overall, those are my thoughts on this. What about you, Des?
Well, I don't go all the way to 80, I don't think. I actually fall more in line with one of the previous responses where I think more like, you know, 40% solo, maybe another 40% group, and then I would say about 20% on the tail end as a, you know, raid, or at least requiring a larger than one group, you know, effort. Whatever that looks like.
That's interesting.
You know, whether
I didn't include any raid in my breakdown, so it's interesting that you included that because I wasn't sure, you know, like I wasn't sure how I felt about including
definitely
raid level
on the
content
tail end, like I said, like a climax of it, you know.
Sure.
Because one of my favorite things about the epic quest in EQ2 was the final bit. You literally get your epic as like a raid. Like that's when it happens, and it actually broadcasts it across the server. When each person it broadcasts your name and your guild, which I always thought was very interesting, and all of the global channels and stuff like that. You know, people would be saying like congrats, and it's, you know, all that, and so it's like the guild recognition, and, you know, everyone can join in with your celebration, which is something you hit on and I think is really important. I think the final end of any gain, like meaningful gain in a quote unquote epic quest, should be experienced with as many people as possible.
Yeah, on that we're for sure in agreement. Yep, definitely.
Yeah, and I like the idea of the peaks and troughs. If we're talking about like epic weapons or, you know, anything like that, I feel like there should be interim rewards for sure. Just because going on like a long quest where you're not getting anything, and, you know, some of these could take a month, right? Like this is
if not longer,
huge endeavors.
Absolutely.
And so there's got to be something in between. So I'm really big on that. But I think the biggest, I don't want to say the most important thing to me, but the most important thing I'm thinking of right now is the experiencing things together, and that's the main important part that makes it epic, is overcoming a challenge with other people for a great reward. Now, the other things that I want to kind of throw in here, again, using the EQ2 model, would be like one thing that you would consider epic about the EQ2 quests. And I'm pretty sure every epic quest required this, but it might have been specific. Like each class had their own, thing. And there wasn't a lot of crossover, which I actually think is a huge deal. I don't want there to be a lot of crossover because so many games now like recycle, 80% of an epic quest just so that everyone can, do it together, be on the same exact page, right? But then it's
yeah, for sure.
It's not my thing. It's literally the same for everyone. And so, but anyway, there were some prep work. There was a lot of prep work for epic quests. And one of the things that I always thought was like super epic was you had to learn how to speak as a dragon. You had to do the dragon language quest, which
that's a good one.
Which unfortunately, to speak as a dragon language quest is incredibly tedious. So it's like that's where it didn't really pan out, but that's the kind of like prerequisite that's not like it's not listed or anything. Like it's not like you can't start the quest before you've learned to speak as a dragon, but there comes a point where to progress you have to know Draconic, and especially how like EQ2 did the language with like the text actually being different and, and all of that. Nice touch, right? But I love that kind of prereq stuff where you have to engage with the world ahead of time or, as a necessity to keep going, but it's not, technically part of the quest. It's not a tracked thing. It's like, hey, you just happen to need this as well for your journey. And so as non-linear as it can be in that sense.
That's exactly the word I was just going to say. I was going to say a non-linear is what you're looking for there.
Yeah. And I don't mean like full sandbox, right? But just as many little things like that you can throw in there, I think adds to the whole experience of, and that climax of you're finally after, traveling the world and learning all these things and doing all these things, being in all of these places and dungeons and etc. Now is the time, like I finally get my thing. And to me, man, I think that is lessened as you lower the amount of players. So if it's like, if you turn in the quest as a solo and it gives you this epic thing, I would be very disappointed, right? That's why I throw the raid in there. It's just because when you finally get your thing in a raid, you're just around as many people as possible, and it makes it as special as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can't argue with that. And I think that's a good point. I was using, when I hear Epic Quest, I always go back to original EverQuest. And, to get your Epic didn't necessarily need a raid level item. You could get it without, it was group, maybe two groups, but, it never was that big moment to get your Epic weapon. But then there was planar gear, which was almost as much of a reward and as big a deal as the Epic weapon was. I liked what you said about the different aspects of the quest. There's so many things you can do. Like you were talking about learning a language. I mean, that's not necessarily a group experience. That's more of a solo experience. Right. You're not going to do that as a group. So there's lots of parts that aren't, might not be officially part of the quest chain per se that you can do as a solo player. Maybe there's stuff that even isn't required at all, but just makes things easier down the road, right? Sort of paves the way for that group content that you can do as a solo
random
player.
Things like you could imagine a part of a quest that requires a boat. Yeah. And it's like, I mean, maybe you could get across the water some other way, but ideally you would need a boat. And so you have to go to crafters and the crafters make you a boat, or maybe you have to find a summoner and slowly paddle.
Yeah, exactly. Those are really good points. So let us know what you think about this. Like what are your numbers if you're listening to this? How much of the epic quests, big quests like this should be soloable? Because that's what we're talking about here. And it'd be interesting to hear other people's experiences and where your heads are at with that. So yeah, we'll leave it there for the VR news for the week. Let's do a quick look at the Pantheon Plus notes. And just a reminder, I want to remind everybody, we've also got Benonai's fan-made trailer contest. Yeah, he sent a reminder letting us know that December 5th is the deadline for that. And I've put a link to his forum post where details the rules and sort of, what he's looking for here in the show notes for you. So if you want to take a look at that, so far there's entries from myself. Drac did one, Sir Medieval did one, 187 did one, and they're all very cool and quite different from each other one. So VR is also following this. There's a posting in the forums saying, hey, maybe they'll give an acknowledgement and just in the forums or something like that when the contest is said and done. And Benonai is put out his leatherworking skills as a reward for this contest. So if you want a leather keychain that he's taken upon himself to make, then get your video editing skills out and throw up a trailer. But looking at the calendar for the week, it's a bit of a lighter week. Of course, on Tuesdays, we're playing Embers Adrift on the MMO 101 and the MMO 201. So Tuesday night, that's on 9 o'clock Eastern. And it's on Sparoh's Twitch channel again this week, as it was last week, because Drac is on holidays. So Sparoh is kind enough to host it on her channel. And then on Thursday, that's at 7 o'clock Eastern on our YouTube channel right here, with me and Des and our friends. So we're having a good time with that game, man. And there's something about it that I want to play it all the time. Desrin, I know you say sometimes we're talking, you're like, I feel like playing numbers right now. I'm like, yeah, I do too.
Yeah, of everything, like it's kind of the only MMO that I have a desire to play right now. Maybe not all the time, but like
enough.
It's got something.
It's got the secret sauce. Yeah. On Friday, we've got our friend Redbeard Flynn has a video. No, he did a video last week, some concerns with Ashes of Creation and sort of where things are at with their development. Well, he's talking about Pantheon. He's voicing some concerns with Pantheon and what he's seeing in the development lately. So, as always, Redbeard Flynn provides really good critical insight and analysis for his stuff. So if you want to get a good, honest review and his take on things, it's probably a good channel to be subscribed to and have notifications turned on. Another good channel for that is our friend Nathan Napalm, and the Cringe Pony TV experience is back for season 2, Saturday nights. That's midnight Eastern, 11 o'clock Central, to check out the latest episode of Cringe Pony. And the schedule for the week, that is it from November 7th through to the 13th. And it's also this week's VR News and Notes. When the Pantheon community speaks, we listen. So let's dig into the forums and fan projects to see what the discussion's all about.
Right, this community discussion, this one's pulled from our very own Pantheon Plus Discord. This is from the Pantheon chat channel. So, obviously that's a bit of a plug. But no, it's nice to see some thoughtful discussion in there. So we may as well highlight it, right? So this is started by Stonefish, well-known community member here, who shared this chart. And this is from a survey of WoW players, where they're asked to grade themselves from 1 to 100 according to these various motivational subcomponents of the game.
Right.
So basically, it's what motivates them. That's kind of what the survey is asking.
Yeah, and I'll put the graphic on the screen so everybody can see this while we're talking about it, because it's hard to visualize unless you can see it, but it'll be in there. So
yeah, and for the folks that are just listening, because podcast. So I'll give a quick rundown of like probably just the three-fourths majority for each category, since that's kind of the important part of the discussion. But firstly here, let me just list the categories so everyone can be familiar with that. So the categories were advancement, mechanics, competition, socializing, relationship, teamwork, discovery, role-playing, customization, and escapism. Right off the like some of those I kind of feel overlap maybe a bit.
Yeah.
Maybe a little redundant, but I think it's kind of beside the point, I guess. But you'll see some of these get dramatically different gradings. And, again, this is a survey of WoW players, right? So people, what they're motivated for in WoW. But I found this really interesting. So let's get into the rating. So again, this is the 3/4 majority. But I feel like this is kind of encapsulates most of it. So advancement rated 92.
I thought that was
my gosh.
That stuck out to me right off the hop. That's the number. I think it's the number one thing.
It's actually the number two thing.
Okay.
But the next up that scored highly is mechanics at 85. And then this is the big one. Competition got about 95.
Interesting. And you can sort of like break down what kind of competition they're talking about. There's, what are they competing? What is the competition about?
Yeah, and I would have loved to kind of look up this whole study. I couldn't find it. Maybe my Google Foo was not doing too good, but yeah. So the competition at 95, and then we get down to socializing at 69. Then relationship at 70, which I would expect to be pretty close to each other. And then there's teamwork, which goes up to 85. And now we're getting into the tail end. So then we hit discovery, which hits an abysmal 43.
The lowest on the entire
literally
chart.
The lowest thing. So very few people in WoW seem to care about discovery.
Which is very interesting.
It really is. And in fact, that's even lower than role-playing. Role-playing scored 46, which, not much higher, but still, I know there is a thriving roleplay community in WoW, so I don't want to discount that. But yeah. And then customization. Now this one, I didn't put this in the notes, but this one actually surprised me a lot. This came in at 57. And I'm trying to think, like, how many mount collectors and,
Oh, this is the transmog motivation, right? Like, this is I just want to look like, I really want to craft my character to look the way I want it. That's the motivation factor.
Yeah, exactly. So I was surprised that was actually as low as it was, especially compared to, other things. But then lastly, escapism, which is 59. But at the same time, I don't know how many people on a survey would say that, oh yeah,
that's their primary motivation.
Totally, But a little bit of the weakness of a survey, but I still found these really, really interesting. So, but yeah, right off the bat, top aspects of WoW that motivate a majority of those players is advancement and competition. And then discovery is, way down at 43. Okenair brought up a good point about this, about why advancement might be like such a huge part. WoW has this achievement UI that has pretty much every instance, every encounter, whatever you want to call it, it's already in there. So even at the start of an expansion, you literally already know how many zones, how many dungeons, raids, factions, special items, or what, all that. You already know all those things you need to, complete to finish or whatever. So in that sense, there kind of is no discoverable stuff in the first place.
Yeah. So it kind of skews it to, it's very context specific to a WoW context because of the way it's set up.
Yeah. Yeah. But still really interesting, I find. And, but yeah, everything in WoW is so extremely quantifiable that, yeah, it probably skews those numbers. And, of course, on the competition side, plenty of leaderboards. So I think especially in the raiding community, which is a pretty good chunk of the WoW community, the competition is huge just on trying to push those raids, right? But yeah, so Okenair's kind of thought on this seems to be that Pantheon probably won't have this achievement list like this. So
I sure hope not.
Yeah, that's what they said too.
Sure hope not.
I sure hope it doesn't. Just because it spoils and reveals everything. And so it kind of forces, not having that, I should say, kind of forces players to actually decide what they want, which would, in turn kind of necessitate that exploration and boom, discovery, right?
Discovery. Yeah, the funny thing is that because, like I said, it's in the context of WoW, you're talking about the game, the biggest MMO ever that's ever been made, or most popular, at least in the West, has been metriced and analyticed to death. There's been so much. I mean, if you don't think Blizzard knows exactly what people want in terms of, or at least what they say they want in terms of the game,
I'm about to say.
You're not paying attention. This is not, they're not making decisions blindly. They have designed the game based on what players have said they like and what they find fun. But then you're getting into this a situation like this where you're getting players responding, and it's reinforcing that. But it's only because it's being done.
It's like a
the
cycle,
answers are
right?
being dictated. It's a cycle. The answers are being dictated by the arena. Yeah, the arena that it's being the questions are coming from. So yeah, you're in a feedback loop here and this is the problem where a lot of these things there may be some truth in some of these things about what people are motivated by, but we've disallowed for any kind of variation from this because the metrics have been so strong and they've just been compounded over the years because of Blizzard sort of and WoW dominating and leading the way with MMO design, I guess you could say. So I think this is that's why I think this question is so interesting, because it gets to the core of where we're at with MMOs about WoW, the design of WoW and it dictating this path forward. So, I just wanted to bring that up.
No, that's actually really, really big. I'm going to stray off a bit here because one of the funny things about this whole advancement is such a huge, huge part. So I would assume that's more like, it's acquiring things, it's progressing your character, it's, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I hear advancement, I hear progression.
Which is so prevalent in WoW, right? And obviously, like, we don't want to lose progression, so it's an obvious thing, but at the same time, there's such a, straight track in WoW. You just, it's a checklist, it really comes down to a checklist. And one kind of mind-blowing thing to me, and I have to kind of relent this a bit and not trash it too much, is I know there's a lot of people out there, obviously, that like checklisting.
Yeah.
I am not a fan at all, but I am forced to recognize that a vast amount of the MMO audience doesn't seem to care much about, the game, the immersion, the environment, the world. It's more, it makes me think of, there's a video a long time ago that came out that made this kind of joke, is this argument, disguised in comedy, that WoW is cool now, and so it's not WoW anymore. and kind of like, you could extrapolate that to the MMORPG genre, and where you get a lot of people that don't even care about the, sci-fi or fantasy genres that play the game because of the advancement, the checklisting, the competition, the, one-upmanship or whatever. Like,
it could be any aesthetic. It could be any, world type thing. It could be history. It could be historical fiction. It doesn't matter. What you're saying is that there's an identifiable checklist I can complete. There's a sense of accomplishment that I can do something fully. That's what's attractive about it.
Yeah. I mean, and we're seeing that actually a lot lately, where it's like the same formula, just with a different skin.
Yeah.
And you see, like, a good million people flock to it for a few months. They do their checklists and then they flock to the next checklist. And that is just a very, I don't even know what else to say about that. It's just a very interesting, like, social, psychological thing, right?
There's a theory in psychology, sociology, that basically says humans always seek the absolute efficiency in every human activity we undertake. And it actually leads to a type of psychosis. it leads to feelings of less fulfillment and social disconnection. Because when we do that, we tend to lose all the things along the way, the inefficiencies, the things that are not as goal oriented, that detract from that goal, are what make it give it its flavor and give it its context and its contour. So, and I feel like this is sort of where we're going with this discussion, is that we've sort of efficiency'd the fun out of it and made it into something that we also enjoy, but on a different level.
Yeah, or for just different reasons, which I think this chart makes pretty clear. That certain things aren't really prioritized as much as others. When I'll probably say this a few times, but as we're going through this, obviously this is a Pantheon podcast and we're talking about WoW. But the implication here is that it'd be very interesting to take the same survey of all of the people interested in Pantheon. Because if it's just our small community, I feel like it would be rather skewed, right?
Well, and maybe be a little premature for that right now.
Yeah.
Once Pantheon's out there in a thing, we maybe come back and we look at doing a poll like this, because I bet you the results would be much different.
I think so too. But actually, let's get into something that I don't think would be much different. And that's the teamwork score. Teamwork and mechanics, actually, they both scored 85. So that it indicates, WoW actually has a pretty strong grouping and rating experience, which I think that's a good sign for Pantheon as well. Mechanics and teamwork is a huge part of Pantheon's design. And so it's interesting that there's some crossover there, in spite of the games executing those things quite differently.
And well, I think and WoW has changed over the years to the point where, I think that's probably the root of a lot of complaints of modern WoW, is that they've maybe gotten away from that a little bit, and people are missing that. I don't know how old this study is. I don't know when it was taken, what phase of WoW it was taken in, because I think that would be relevant. But a lot of people still really like that high end. I'm not a WoW player, so I'll get it wrong, but the high end stuff that requires group work, teamwork, that's the part they still love, and all the other stuff that comes before it feels kind of lame to them, now, and that's the comments
or it's been efficiencyed, as I know from at least a handful of WoW raiders that push into Mythic Plus and all that stuff, is the rest of the game is kind of just like their checklist to get to this part where they're challenged, and they have this, this kind of goes back to the whole competition thing, but at the same time, the rest of the game is kind of okay, this is the prerequisite so that we can actually be challenged as a group and overcome these challenges, which if we're talking about Pantheon, right? It's Pantheon is just kind of bringing that closer to the start is all.
Yeah.
So
just giving you more of it, giving it to you sooner and in more accessible ways.
Right. It's instead of doing this kind of, efficiency mundane kind of checklist to get to the point where you are enjoying this teamwork, the mechanics and all this stuff. It's well, now we're just kind of fast forwarding that, where, it all kind of goes together. There isn't a prerequisite. There isn't a checklist to go through first. There's not a, treadmill.
Right.
It's no, we're kind of hitting that right at the start. And that's kind of what I think is, if I had a very positive thing to kind of point out about this, I think this is one of the key areas where I feel like a lot of WoW players actually will enjoy Pantheon.
Agreed, 100%.
They're wow, 100%. This thing that I used to have to grind and waste my time on, it's in the forefront. Yeah.
Right.
But then we get to socializing and relationship. I'm conflicted about this one. They come at this pretty mild, 69, 70-ish. So I really can't tell if I'm surprised by how high it is or how low it is.
Well, you never know. I mean, see, the thing with this area, I think, is really player dependent. I really feel like there's a wide range of, some players are very motivated by the social aspect of things, and some players, that's just an added benefit to them. The progression comes first, the challenge comes first, and the socializing is fine, but it's not the primary driver.
Yeah.
This score kind of makes sense to me. I think it fits with my picture of the MMO player. If I was to create like a, a general makeup of a MMO player, I would say that the score seems correct to me.
Well, what's interesting about this is probably one of the biggest parts of the chart where the median score actually differs quite a bit, because the median falls all the way to 40.
Right. Okay.
So I think that can say something as well, while it might be slightly less accurate. But I kind of feel just how big WoW is. I think a lot of people just tend to have friends that play or play with others. And even though they don't have like a lot of, I don't want to say mechanics, but like guilds don't serve much more of a purpose than just kind of gathering people. I think their guilds are still a pretty big deal in WoW. Just for the sake of the other parts of the game more than anything. But, inevitably that gives some socialization.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think Pantheon is going to aim for the player that is inclined towards socializing, but is also cognizant of the fact that it's not a glorified chat room. Like, we're not creating a virtual space for people to have a chat room. Like they're going to keep the game centered. Like, it's going to be keeping the game in the center, and then building it with a social mindset. And that's a discussion we've had before.
Right.
It's like, yeah, you know what I'm saying.
No, I do, and I think that's totally true. And a differentiator is that you could think of one game being about designing the entire game around social aspects, but not making social aspects like the main part of the game, right? Like, this isn't Second Life.
That's right.
But versus plenty of other games that just happen to add a chat room on top of a solo game.
Yeah, and that's what I'm sort of envisioning when I say that. So it's like, we're I think the MMO player that we're more aligned with, and maybe the Pantheon community might be, is the one that really craves and needs that gameplay and the challenge and the interesting things, and having other people to experience that. It's the same discussion we just had. Having other people to experience that with and be social with makes it just so much better.
Yeah.
But we want to do that, but we're not going to do it without the game. We can do that right now. We can just hop into a Discord channel and chat.
That's true. There's got to be some other part of it too, right?
Yeah.
But as I said, I'd be really curious to see the same survey done on the Pantheon community. But and while I expect different results, some might not be so different. I like I said, some things I think there's crossover for. And this was about WoW, but it was also about Pantheon. So hopefully this interested you guys enough to participate in the discussion. Again, this is happening on our Discord. So you could jump right in if you'd like. And that's the Pantheon chat channel. And so I'll actually even put a link down below in the show notes to where the conversation starts with the graph and everything like that. So for your convenience, because this is super interesting. So yeah, jump in there. But that is going to be it for this week's community discussion. The Pantheon community is full of cool projects, new people, and things that are just worth sharing. What's this over here? Look at that. So let's see what we can find in this week's Community Spotlight. All right, just a few quick things on the Community Spotlight side today. First off, we've got our November calendar, as in the schedule that they released with the newsletter. This is by Sparoh, doing these each month just to get everyone caught up with a little bit of context on the calendar. It's very helpful. So that's going to be linked down below. And hopefully a lot of people are, subscribing to our channel just so when that comes out, they can get a video form of this content schedule, which is helpful.
Yeah, go throw a sub for Sparoh and get notified when that schedule comes out, because she does a good job of just breaking it down, telling you about it.
Yep. Yeah, it's great. And then the next one we've got is a Sir Medieval video. This is I'm not even going to do the voice because this isn't even that bad. This is the item system explained. Pantheon Rise of the Fallen MMORPG, because that's got to be in there. Adventuring gear and abilities. Okay, maybe I did have a little bit of snark. I totally get it. For the record, like I totally get titles like this, and I don't judge him at all. It's just the state of things, right? And this is actually a summary of Parting the Veil Live. So this is a bit late because apparently his PC just got completely jacked up by Windows, like Windows completely corrupted while he was making the video. So it's a bit late. It's a bit late. But if you want to catch up, and also of course he throws his own ideas in there on things as well, so to make it its own thing. So yeah, it's finally up. Then next, we've got a new Disparate Worlds format starting to shine through. And this one is called Pantheon Brief, October 22, as in 2022, newsletter highlights. And so Disparate Worlds, this is just Moxus doing a quick recap of the newsletter, like real quick, very short. So like I said, this is part of their kind of new content that they're doing. And I'm liking it. I'm liking it so far.
I am too, actually, and I like that we had a little back and forth with them last week. I went back when I was listening to it again. I'm like, oh, that's kind of fun, and I like that when I did my lore video this week, Sakari actually commented on it, I think retweeted or something like that, and said, that was what he was looking for with the Saval Manor stuff, and I was like, yes, like goal accomplished, because that's what he talked about in the last one. So I really appreciated them, sort of shouting that out and doing a little Twitter promotion on that. So it was fun.
It's like, I mean, just to dote on the community as I like to. This is such a great part of our content creator community around Pantheon. It's like we're all kind of, I don't want to say filling in the gaps, right? But we're all kind of like in little areas, and there's of course going to be crossover, especially as the community grows, and that's great. But we all kind of do something at least a little bit different, and just celebrate each other's content, and a great example of
that. Absolutely.
And then lastly, we've got a new entry by Benonai at long last. This is Amensol's Focused Bloodlust, Chapter 12. And that's going to be up on Pantheon.plus with a linked PDF as well for your reading pleasure. And yeah, did I miss anything, Tarek? I always feel like I'm missing something.
No, I think you got it all. Check out Benonai's last work. It's a good story. It's a continuation of the story, and you should be able to read the previous chapters if you're not caught up on it on the website there, because I looked at it earlier this week, and I think you covered everything.
Okay, awesome. Just a light week, it's just one of those weeks. So
it is a light
hopefully
week.
Everyone enjoyed, right? But that's going to be it for this week's Community Spotlight.
Sit back and relax. It's time for the lore you know. All right, time for some lore, and we have our winners, our keepers this week. I want to show you on the screen. We have one apprentice this week, and we have two lore keepers this week. One returning from last week, so I'm very proud of that. Glad to see the lore folks are paying attention and growing. So the question last week was about the halflings, and the question was, what is the name of their home city? And that's Sorhireth. And the second question was, what do they like to hunt? And the answer is wraiths. So I'm just going to read you the lore bit from the website that gives you those answers. So it says, the halflings make their home in Sorhireth, a winding, vertical, and peculiar city built amidst the massive tower oaks of Wild's End. Here you will find three primary branches of their people, the Escap, the Maiden clan, and the Nothi, all living in relative peace, distinct but not segregated. The hollows and burrows mingle seamlessly with the titan trees, a testament to the halfling skill of adaptation. While most travelers are joyfully welcomed here, the instincts of the host race are sharper than the daggers beneath their cloaks. And then in another piece on the website, it says this: their heritage as wraith hunters is dreadfully serious, however. to avenge the wrongs of Molths. They persecute his ilk in every crevice of Terminus, chasing whispers that the silent wraith smolders in secret somewhere among the realms. So there's your answers from last week. So now I got some new questions this week. And I want to get more people involved in this. So yes, it's a little basic, but I think
I was about to criticize you, but come on, guys. This is low-hanging fruit. I believe in you.
Yeah. I believe in you too. And I want to have a big graphic this week with lots of lore keepers. So the question is, number 1, what is the current name of the planet players will adventure upon in Pantheon? The second question is, what is the current year of the planet in Pantheon? At launch, when we all log in, what is the current year? So again, you can find your answers at pantheonmmo.com. You can check out the playlist on our channel here. Theric's Lore Library is the playlist that has many, many lore videos to catch up on. And then if you want to answer, you can leave a comment on the video, or you can join our Discord, go into the channel, The Lore You Know, leave your answer there. And that is The Lore You Know. All right, so I want to congratulate our winners from our pledge giveaway. Whoever they are, whoever you are, congratulations. It's so awesome that we're able to do this, and very much looking forward to the next time again when we can do this, because it just makes so much, our Sundays become fun and a little frantic, but also fun. So if you want to pledge, all you got to do is contact me, Theric, via Discord. You can ping me on Discord. My DMs are open. You can email me at theric@pantheon.plus. And just as a sort of a PSA, I'll wait for you to contact me. So I'm not going to reach out to you. Don't be fooled by somebody reaching out pretending to be me. There are scammers out there, and somebody actually brought this to my attention, and I want to thank them for that, because it's a good reminder. Like people are be like, hey, you just give me your information, I'll give you a prize. It's like, no. You contact me, that way I know, and we'll talk, and we'll make sure that we're all on the same page. So so there's that. And then just say another great week. I know it's a light news week, so we didn't have a lot of big things to talk about, Des. But hopefully you were entertained. I know I was.
Yeah, I feel like we got some really good discussions in there, in spite of the light news. But it's one of those. I don't want to say calm before the storm. I mean, it's already storming here. But we have this kind of break week, semi-monthly, right? And the amount of content that Pantheon, the Visionary Realms, I should say, is releasing, there's plenty. So it's almost nice. It's almost enjoyable to have a break week where we can, catch up on community discussions, because sometimes we don't have time and all that. So thanks everyone for sticking around. Again, congrats to the winners, and appreciate y'all.
Yeah, absolutely. I second all that. And so come back next week. Make sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, share the podcast with your friends on Twitter or on wherever you want to share it is fine. And with that, we'll say cheers, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Pantheon Plus Rewind. Pantheon Plus is not affiliated with Visionary Realms. Be sure to check out our Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube channels under the name Pantheon Plus. You can follow Theric at Pantheon Theric on Twitter, and Desrin at DesrinDoes also on Twitter. And you can stay up to date with all things Pantheon at www.pantheon.plus. Until next time, cheers, and thanks for listening.